They say that the poor is big business. You want to listen to this presentation if you fit into either of these categories. If you live in a poor community where year after year after year after decade, programs, projects, and initiatives, they come and they go, and the community remains the same. If you live in a community where residents are considered clients instead of partners and owners in transforming your community, or if you are a community resident that feel powerless, powerless, no power when it comes to trying to change the narrative. You want to listen to what this video is going to share in the promise of what we know now in terms of changing the narrative in poor, distressed communities throughout the United States. What you're looking at now is a presentation that was given in the Sandtown Winchester community in about 2008. This is a little background. The Sandtown Winchester community is a community located in West Baltimore. It is a community that's small, although small in size compared to other communities. It's very high when it comes to negative indicators from crime, breaking houses, health issues, mental health, joblessness, and the list goes on. The workshop was designed to provide residents with an approach to empower them to change the narrative in their neighborhood. So it was entitled The Sandtown Community, Building Ownership and Empowerment. It talked about the only key success to moving a community forward and empowering that community if it has ownership in the process and they are empowered to exercise that ownership. So Roosevelt Boone III, an attorney, was the lead consultant on this. He is the person that brought me in. Roosevelt had a lot of background when it comes to community development and economic development, workforce development, and all those things needed to move a community forward. The group that we prepared this for was the Sandtown Residential Action Committee, CDC. It was funded back then by the Enterprise Community Partners. So the next section is going to talk about a little bit about me, related to my role, my thoughts. And then it's going to go into best practices from around the country, and then it's going to move into solution-oriented programs that can change the narrative. The program that I'm going to talk about is called Community Building and Partnership. Community Building and Partnership was a public and private initiative, and it launched the transformation of the west of the Sandtown community. What it did was to bring a new school, next generation approach to transforming community. A little bit about my background. So I'm looking at it from both perspectives. From one perspective, I have grown up in some of the most crime-ridden, drug-infested, distressed communities. I continue to live in a community like that. So from one perspective, I'm coming from a bird eye, up in your face, understanding of life, living in a poor community. So it's like a bottom-up approach to understanding. Mark that with the fact that I was able to get the training necessary to create the change that is necessary to what I think is easing the pain. This is a little bit of background. So my first introduction to community building, and that's what I did, started in the early 1980s when I was hired as a community organizer for an organization called the Sandtown Winchester Improvement Association. From there, because I was so curious about change, from there, I advanced to training and being a community strategist, a program developer, designing community comprehensive solutions to urban and distressed neighborhoods. In short, being able to change the dial, change the narrative when it comes to how do we change poor communities throughout the United States. So I came really prepared in terms of how do you begin to address issues in your community. I was fortunate enough to get the training necessary, to get the tools necessary, combined with having lived in that poor community to make the change that's necessary. So a lot of my training came from the area of community and economic development. My training includes like national organizations, like the community enterprise. The other organization called LIST, of the local initiative support corporations. These two organizations collectively service more nonprofits than any combined group in the United States. So I've gotten training from both of those. On the federal level, I've gotten training from HUD, from helping community service. Again, all of this training goes back to community and economic development. In terms of the university level, I've gotten training from the University of South Florida and FAMU. In terms of corporations, that includes the Bank of America. We even got training from IRS. All this prepared me in terms of changing the narrative on moving the dial when it comes to transforming communities that I come from. Coupled with that was the Small Business Administration. So I come to the table with a lot of background. I'm so blessed to be able to come from the bottom and actually become part of the solution to changing and transforming the neighborhoods that I come from every day, that I see every day, that I believe that there is promise in terms of changing the narrative if we think like new school, next generation. So going back to Sandtown. Sandtown was called an initiative that in Sandtown was called a transformation of the Sandtown neighborhood. It was a public-private relationship, and I'm gonna talk more about that when it was a public-private relationship to transforming communities. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that. But this particular photo that you're looking at, I made a statement during the transformation. They asked me, what did I think transformation is and what does it look like? As you see, Sandtown resident. I can't believe 1990. Anyway, way back then, this was my thinking. I stated that transformation is the homeless family now buying a house. The criminal now teaching the young to go straight. Breaking lots now full with flowers. In a community where residents had no time for each other are now becoming a community where residents hold hands around their community. So this is my thinking and what has led me to where I'm at today. So let's continue on so you can understand I'm deep in this. So now let's go back to let's go to the next part of this presentation, talking about partnerships between the public and the private sector. This particular partnership was called Community Building and Partnership. It was one of the first comprehensive and holistic approach to transforming our poor communities. It was a partnership on the Enterprise Foundation. As you can see, this is Mr. Rouse right here from the Enterprise Foundation. And a partnership with the Baltimore City. As you can see here, this is the mayor of Baltimore, Kurt Schmoke. Very smart man, Harvard, Yale, a Princeton type of connection. So the idea behind this partnership was that we needed to rethink how we were transforming communities. That we needed to move from a singlistic approach, like health, drugs, crime, and move to a comprehensive approach where we're looking at the solution to the problem as a whole, and also looking at the different parts that make up the whole. This particular picture here with Mr. Rouse and I in it was when the PBS came out that did an interview with me and Mr. Rouse because of the national implication of this new approach. There were people from around the country and the world that came to Sandtown to see what was this new idea of trying to transform communities all at the same time. This thinking led to the foundation of what was then called the Federal Empowerment Zone. That's how impactful this new school of thought was. And this is where I got my training from. Now, Mr. Rouse appreciated my insight and my ability to learn fast and to actually be able to articulate a position and the perspective from the community. So that's why he chose me to speak to and share with the nation in terms of what does community empowerment look like. That was a great opportunity. Now, because I understood the process, Mr. Rouse, or people higher up, then asked me to speak to organizations from around the country and around the world that came to Sandtown, that came to Baltimore to see what is this new idea on how to transform communities. In this particular picture right here, the conversation was the big picture related to comprehensive and holistic approach from a community grassroots perspective. This picture right here was me showing what does it actually look like. And I talked about what was then that was created, which was called the self-motivated community people realist center. That creation was people from around Tampa, and I'm sorry, around Sandtown, that felt empowered in order to make a change. I met some great people that was part of the self-motivated community people realist center. And that in itself showed the thinking that we had in terms of a community. So that being said, I was selling the deal to folks from around the country on how does it look to be empowered and what does it look like in terms of your program, your project, your mission, your person, your purpose, etc. Now, not only did they want me to sell the deal to the organizations, groups from around the country, funders, etc. They also wanted me to sell the deal to the private sector. And this is where I attended a meeting in which I got a response back saying that I killed it. I was able to transition from being able to talk to an audience that is in the private sector to an audience that's in the community setting, or an audience that's a lender or a developer or a lender or an investor or any of those different groups of people. My job was to be able to articulate the plan to a broader group of individuals. It all started as a community organizer. This picture shows my passion to want to make a difference. I think this was taken 30 years ago. Yeah, 30 years ago. I don't know, about 30 years ago. And I started as a community organizer. So I started looking at the bigger picture. And my skill set as a community organizer prepared me to how to mobilize and organize groups of people around issues. That talent, like that talent that Barack Obama has placed me in a good position with that skill set to get community buy-in, understanding how to get buy-in from the community. I took all of that training that we talked about earlier, fast forward, and begun to engage communities and educators who represent the next generation of scholars. From the University of South Florida to Baltimore Johns Hopkins, having conversations. This group here was a group of folks from around Florida that came to hear about what was going on in Tampa that reflected a new school of thought of how communities were empowering themselves to change the narrative. This picture here represents when I was asked to speak at the University of South Florida to their grad students. I was so good at speaking to the grad students that they asked me back a second time to speak to grad students. So it's been a good opportunity, I think, from where I come from a person that came from a community of folks that felt powerless to do anything about their conditions, to grow up and be one of those individuals to create empowerment and to create a sense of hopefulness. So anyway, here it is. Finally, we get to this part of the presentation that talks about what is it that we did in Sandtown and how we believe that what you're about to see now can be reduplicated in the Sandtown Winchester community today in 2023. So let's go back to talk about what we was trying to do and what we presented to the community. The first thing we share with the community is that there's two approaches to strategic planning. The first approach, and this approach is most common when outside people come in to do a program or project. We talked earlier about programs coming in year after year after year. A need assessment model appears to impose standard. That means they come in and they create the standard of operation. It is driven by outside agencies. Listen up, it views residents as programs clients. It continues to outflow of community resources instead of the inflow of community resources. This is what we call a need Assessment is based on the fact that you need something. The most plausible, feasible, um, sellable, bankable, uh, sustainable, marketable, fundable, and all of those bulls that you can use to change the narrative is using an assets billing model. Well, an assets billing model focus on existing capacity. It's relationship driven, promotes self-sufficiency, and recycle resources within the community. This is what we call community empowerment. Now, assets mapping is an approach to development. It brings together three disciplines, and that is neighborhood planning. That's how you connect the community and plan for and on behalf of the community. Community organizing, that's how you bring the people together and get buy-in. And economic development. Now, it attempts to mold these three disciplines into a single methodology for community revitalization. And this becomes the basis of the initiative that you're going to be hearing about. Now, assets billing model, let's talk about that. The first principle of an asset building strategy is to begin by identifying what is present in the community. It looks at inside. It looks at resident skills, neighborhood associations, and institutions, instead of what's absent or what's programmatic. Remember we talked earlier about a need assessment. That looks at what's absent and what's programmatic. Assets mapping looks at it on the opposite side. Now, the primary purpose of assets mapping is to provide the community with an understanding of its potential for revitalization. The key in which is the process of assembling the map skills and capacity into combinations and structures that enhance or multiply their effectiveness. We actually created a web and an active website that allowed us to map people's skill sets and capacities to potential jobs in and out of the community. As one example of assets mapping. So now we went to the brainstorming section with the community. Keep in mind, we had neighborhood groups and residents and shareholders from around the community to partake in this training. I was happy because I was one of the trainers. I was brought in as a trainer because of my background in the West Tampa and other communities that could be defined as a community that is under stress, that's distressed, poor. That background that I had in working in those communities brought me to be part of the deal related to the Sandtown deal that we're talking about today. But it was my background. You're going to hear a little bit about more about my background and how that background prepared me to create something even better than what I understood back then. So we started off with what is strategic planning? And so we shared with them that it's a 5-year plan. It's a future plan of where you at and where you want to be at in 5 years. We talk about the different components, the framework to creating a strategic plan, the vision, the mission, the value statement, the symptoms, that is, what is the problem? The diagnosis, that is, what's the reason for the problem? And then the themes from the diagnosis that we call the gaps. How do we plug it in? What's missing? How do we fix it? That goes in this in terms of gaps. That then led us to the overall strategy, principles, goals, objectives, strategies, tactics, action, responsibility, resources, timetable, and budget. All of these became part of what does a strategic plan look like. We also share with them what does power look like. In order to be an empowered community, you have to be able to have different types of capital. So here we talk about community empowerment. It's the ability to use capital as a powerful force to creating and controlling, designing, and implementing its vision. That is the community vision. We believe that the solution to the problem is within the problem itself. That is a bottom-up approach from the street up. When we talk about capital, if you want to be an empowered organization, you have to have people power. You have to have buy-in from the right people that live in the community. Then you have to have social capital. That's networks, partnership, and those other things that connect to other resources that's out there. Then you want to have financial capital. You want to have the ability to fund the dream, the mission. You want to have strategic capital. You want to have the framework on how you want to do your theory of change. You want to have skill capital. You want to have those people that have specialized skills that you can connect to in terms of part of how your machine on how you get to where you need to get to. And then you have to have political capital. Political capital is very, very important. So anyway, though that's what we call an empowered community. Have all of those different components. And we're going to talk about how the next project we talk about have all of those components. That is, all of these different types of capital, or at least most of these different types of capital, and why it, and we're talking about the West Tampa Community Development Corporation, serves as the model for what empowerment looks like in terms of amassing the different types of capital. Now, when we talk about empowerment, we need to talk about the different elements of empowerment. What does it look like? Well, first, it should be community design. That is, the community take part in the designing of the program or project or activity that affects them. That is what it looks like. They take part in what it looks like. It should be community ownership, where community takes ownership of the process, which affects their life by having a 51% voting power on the council, or in other words, controlling the process. This is the different types of elements of a good program. It has to be community driven. You have to be able to spark a yes, we can type of atmosphere in the community to motivate people that want to be part of the process, because they've seen so many programs come and go. That's why it's important to paint the picture, is that the element that wasn't there in past programs and projects is that it actually was not controlled and driven by the community. This time you get that community buy-in. Now you get people that want to be part of the process because they are motivated. That is, you create community unity. The other element is community sustainability. Community sustainability is the process of independently being able to finance the deal. I call it social entrepreneurship. You have to be able to create different types of earned income. And it needs to come from different multiple revenue sources. From you actually owning your own nonprofit business, in which you're able to sell something to bring in revenue. So it can include anything that brings in revenue to the organization, and that this is one of the ways. We talk later on in the presentation about the holistic approach to being financially independent and being able to control your destiny. So that being said, let's go to the last item on this list. Community participation and community buy-in. I talked about this earlier. You have to be able to get community participation. And the ways that you do that is to create committees, focus groups, and other activities. You have to work the plan for the plan to work. You have to be able to sell the plan to the person that is a substance abuse, the homeless, the poor, those with mental health issues, those that are suffering in the neighborhood, the at-risk youth, the senior citizen, all of those groups that are being impacted negatively currently in the community. That you need to make sure everybody is at the table to give their version and their piece as to what change look like for them. We talk also more about this community participation buy-in. This becomes the key to getting lenders, funders, partners, etc., to buy into the table. You have to be able to mobilize that community by inspiring them to want to be part of something that's bigger than them. This like Barack Obama did when he did Keep Hope Alive. Whatever phrase that he made, he got people excited about that. So that's going to be very important as you begin to look at how do you get buy-in. You got to motivate and create people. You got to find a phrase that will motivate them, something that people will mobilize and organize around. And once you do that and you got that community empowerment, now you can move forward with creating the plan. Let's talk about the plan. Keeping the plan alive. Okay, so the second part of the presentation that we shared with the community, that is the Residential Action Committee, CDC. Notice also, I can't overemphasize how important it is that you create a community development initiative. But again, that community development initiative should be controlled by 51% of residents that live in that community. So let's move on. I'm kind of long-winded with it, but I think if you stay throughout the process, I think you now have the tools necessary to go back to your community and begin to plant the seeds necessary to have true community empowerment. So we looked at lessons learned and best practices from a number of communities. We looked at Tampa, Baltimore, New School Community Corporation, the Marshall Heights Community Development Corporation, and DC, the New Community Association is inside of New Jersey. Isn't in New Jersey. And then finally, we're going to talk about the Suburban Job Link. What's important about each of these initiatives, that each come with a, what I think is a stream of being able to put together earn income other than grant. That is, creating revenue-driven strategies that builds financial sustainability in the neighborhood. The possibility. Now we want to talk about what works. What does success look like? The first group that we're going to be talking about is a group located in the West Tampa community of Tampa. A lot of unique things about the people that live in this particular area. They remind me so much of Sandtown. As you know, the community I come from, known as Sandtown, is a community of people that feel that they are empowered. They don't step back or sit down when something happens. They become part of the process and they drive the process. This is also true of the people in West Tampa. They show me nothing but love, and I got nothing but love for the people that's in West Tampa. I think that what they've done in this community goes to show in terms of what is a bottom-up approach where the community actually control the process. So in West Tampa, the board of directors consists of 51% residents. So 51% of the residents in West Tampa oversee the West Tampa CDC. The West Tampa CDC is unique in that its approach to rebuilding people is building people. West Tampa focuses on people, place, and things as a strategy to make changes. What was unique and is unique about the West Tampa community, that it was a group of people that were in the community, shareholders from different walks of life, educators, community residents, business leaders that came together to form the West Tampa CDC organization. What is unique about the organization is that the two lead key positions in the community is community residents that have lived there for a long time. The chairperson is the Dr. Margaret Fisher, and the vice chair is Joe Robinson. Both of these individuals stay in the fight. And it's a part because of them that I was brought to Tampa to work with that organization to create a similar strategy that was taking place in Baltimore. And then the use of lessons learned from that to create what works in West Tampa. And they gave me that opportunity to put together the plan. But the plan couldn't work if we didn't have movers and shakers like Dr. Fisher, Joe Robinson, and those other folks in West Tampa, especially neighborhood groups that made sure that the process was going to be kept real. My job was simply to put together the plan. So the West Tampa Corporation blueprint. Let's look at the vision. And this was created by those that was in West Tampa. I just tweaked it, but it still remains the same. The community created this. In terms of vision, it was to create a strong and healthy community where change starts from within. I can't overemphasize to create a strong and healthy community where change starts from within. I think that's the piece I add. Yeah, that sounds like me. But anyway, we wanted to articulate a plan that came from within. That was the vision, that the community was able to create a strong and healthy community, to create a strong and healthy community. The mission, and this was something that was put together by the folks in West Tampa, was to be a catalyst for social, economic, commercial development, housing, and physical development in West Tampa. I added this piece. The methodology used for this initiative was going to be a community mapping asset building strategy that synthesizes 3 community disciplines: neighborhood planning, community organizing, and economic development into a single methodology for community revitalization. The vehicle that we use for this, we call it the action plan, the strategic action plan. So let's look at the blueprint. What did we learn from the Baltimore story? What did we learn from the empowerment zone? What did we learn from the public relationship with the partnership between private and public that brought about community building and partnership? What did we learn? One of the most important things that we learned from that was that unless that group had a financial arm in which it controlled, in which it can attract it, and which is pumping in the finance necessary to keep it afloat, then it doesn't control the process. And added on to that, it's a process where that is the creation of community generational wealth, where the community owns assets that it uses in order to finance its operation. So this operation using a sustainable financial approach. We're going to talk about that approach a little bit later on. But let's get back now to what does the blueprint look like? Well, it starts with the community. Unlike most programs, when you look at that chart as to how does things operate, who's in charge, the community is normally on the second layer, on this layer right here. With this approach, and it believes in a community bottom-up approach, it is the community that pretty much decided what was their vision of the future. What was their vision of creating an inclusive community where residents, no matter what the economic condition, are given a hand up. A community where it positions itself to create the blueprint for success. That then created the West Tampa CDC as the vehicle for the community to fulfill its vision of what it wanted the community to look like. The West Tampa CDC role then that came out of the community was to curate partnerships that brought in resources, partners, and funders. And some of the different funders, partners that the CDC was charged with, partnering with, was the public sector or government and government, nonprofit sector, the private sector, specifically related to lenders, developers, investors, and all of those financial vehicles that one can use to increase the financing of the vision. And then there's institutions of higher learning and partnership with institutions of higher learning and education in general. So this is just part of the overall strategy. It doesn't not exclude any other component, but this is just the larger picture. From that, then we looked at what do we strategically make of this partnership. And from a strategic perspective, we implemented what we call a community comprehensive whole holistic approach. What does that mean? That means how do you look at the community as a whole? Instead of looking at a singlistic approach, how do you look at it as a whole to begin to develop the transformation of that neighborhood? The three key legs of that strategy is economic development, social development, and physical development. Economic development has anything that had to do with money and goods and services. Anywhere from unemployment to unemployment to workforce to all those things in between. That's what we mean by economic development. One of the things that we do related to economic development is to build generational community wealth as part of this narrative. Then we look at social development. And of course, social development is anything that has to do with people. Health, homelessness, youth, crime, family, anything that has to do with people comes under social development. And I'm only named some of the things related to social development. And then finally, the last piece is the land, physical development. What does it look like? Affordable housing, open space, etc. Looking at physical development related to that neighborhood. These are the three key legs to curating what we call a comprehensive, holistic approach. This approach was born out of the Baltimore approach, from the lessons learned from both the Federal Empowerment Zone and all those other programs that came from there, including those lessons learned from the Obama administration, the program that he spearheaded, the Clinton administration, and the program that they spearheaded, all combined together to create at what you're looking at now, and what we call the next school, next generation approach to community transformation. The thing that shook the nation was at first that the community decided to develop its own plan. That's how I was brought in. I was brought in as a consultant. And a consultant, they wanted someone to design their own plan. And then they wanted to bring in all of the shareholders. And that's what we did. That plan that we talked about earlier, community holistic approach, that outline what are our deliverables, our results, if you will. We, that is the community, unveiled its strategic vision to the community on June the 4th, 2005. And as you can see, it was a success. We were able to get national, state, local. We was able to get lenders. We was able to get investors, developers, the government. We was able to bring all of these components to the same table. Institutions of higher learning. The plan was that we would delegate their role in the plan to change West Tampa. This was the first time that a plan was created by the community first. And then it brought in the different players and the role that they served to bring about that particular plan. This is what we call community empowerment. Fast forward, the West Tampa CDC has been really, really, really successful in putting together its public-private relationship to bring about really changes in the neighborhood. Because if you're going to play at that level of the community development level, you have to be able to do some really good deals to bring back the bacon, as they say. Two of the things that West Tampa did during this cycle here, related to public-private relationship, it built a relationship. First, it built a relationship with the mayor. The mayor was really impressed with what was going on in West Tampa. As a result of this meeting, we began to have monthly meetings with the mayor. The mayor was so impressed with our ability to really transform West Tampa that she made it a policy that any developer that's doing large scale things should come to the West Tampa CDC to talk about how can you finesse a deal where that doesn't where how can you finesse a deal where your impact reduce the potential for gentrification. That was a key component, and our key component. How do you create a deal where development is done in a smart way that reduces gentrification? Two of the projects that came out of this was, the first was a deal and was a developer that was going to do a lot of high-end houses in the lower part of West Tampa, lower end of West Tampa, came and sat at the table and wanted to work a deal with the community. I can only say those folks that was part of that negotiation, that includes some key executive members from the Sandtown Winchester, some key executive members from the West Tampa CDC, they finessed a really good deal. I was happy to be part of those negotiations. So one of the deals that came out of that was a grant that will be given directly to the West Tampa CDC for $640,000. That was a lot of money back then in 2005. And the deal, and I think it was that, well, we can reduce the impact of gentrification because now we can provide people that live in West Tampa with closing money. So they could be able to layer the amount of money that they can bring to the table to make the deal work for them to be able to pay the mortgage. In addition to the city down payment, now this is a different type of down payment that they could use. Again, that was to be used to reduce the gentrification. The other piece that was done by another developer was to donate a building to the community that would house the Community Employment Center. The idea being that you're reducing gentrification because now we got a building that we can hire community folks. Keep in mind, West Tampa community is a community that has a lot of people that live below the poverty level. So what this did was to create an opportunity to provide job opportunity within the community where people could get those skill sets to get a job. And not only that, to get a job that could help them stay in and afford to live in the community as well. Those are two examples of how the West Tampa CDC was able to finesse a deal with developers. Now, keep in mind, none of those deals manifest itself to the level that it was. Because if we recall, the bubble bust, and when that bubble bust, we had to draw down what was the expectation from each of those partners. Fast forward, 2023. It's another example of a public-private deal. In this deal, it's called the related, we call it the related deal. It's a deal between the on the West Tampa CDC side of the table. The West Tampa CDC was brought in on what was what was to become the Romeo deal. Our position was to serve on the actual planning committee that was putting together the deal for the Romeo project. That means we had a front seat with those different partners that was putting together the Romeo deal. That was important because it gave us an opportunity to put together what we thought would be something that reduced gentrification. That's something that we talked about was putting together what we call the Technology, Wealth Building, and Job Creation Center. What's important about each of these components that we talked about is that in order to move the dial in poor communities, each of these components are essential. The first, technology. Technology like artificial intelligence and ChatGPT and so many other technologies like doing game coding, game application, mobile application, and then this goes on and on. Virtual reality, technology is changing the narrative. Our approach is using technology in a way to transform Black poor community residents economically using technology like artificial intelligence and ChatGPT. The other part of that, we talked about the technology. Again, it's a three-part approach: technology, wealth building, and job creation. We talked about the technology part in part, but there's so many other pieces to that technology part. The second part is the wealth building part. It's built on the idea of how can we create individual generational wealth as well as community generational wealth. In terms of creating generational wealth related to the individual, the wealth building initiative focus on giving business opportunities. With this first program that's being rolled out, it's called the Home Base / E-commerce Initiative. There are literally hundreds of jobs that can be created using a home-based e-commerce approach. And it's very little or nothing to start that particular type of business. What we're looking at is creating that type of home-based e-commerce business where we provide those folks who have no generational wealth the seed money to create their own business, creating generational wealth. The other part of that scenario is creating an opportunity. Let me back up for 1 second. The home / e-commerce industry is taking off like a superstar. So the other part of that wealth builder strategy is to teach or move folks in poor communities from being a consumer to being an investor. It's a belief that we need to change the narrative on how we spend that $1.6 trillion a year as a group, as a Black people. How do we finesse the deal with flip the switch and become investors? And this is what the second part teach. How to be an investor. How to make money. And we're talking about at least 20, 30 different ways to create that. Plus combined with creating passive income. That's what that segment looked like. That leads to job creation. Now, why is this important? This is shows what happens when you do a partnership with public-private partnership, in which the group that's acting on behalf of the community is sitting at the decision-making table when the project is being developed. Again, I want to give a shout out to the mayor of Tampa, Mayor Jane Castor. Again, she made sure that the community will be part of the narrative when it came to the um, transforming of the Rome Yard project. I talked more about the Rome Yard project that most of you are not familiar to, but this though is a big development on city that use city land to convert to a affordable housing project. Anyway, I want to give kudos or give a shout out because this goes to show when you got back from the mayor. This is also true when we talked earlier about West Tampa related to the employment center and the down payment assistance. It was the mayor, then Mayor Castor, Mayor I.O. I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong. Mayor I.O. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. But again, that was a key component in what we call creating that type of empowerment. Two mayors who created an opportunity to make sure that the community in that neighborhood was able to sit at the decision-making table and to bring home the bacon. Again, this is the same strategy used in Baltimore during the empowerment zone and doing community building partnership, in which the mayor, then Mayor Kurt, focused on that particular area and making sure resources was coming in that neighborhood and that the community was part of that change. So yeah, we talked earlier about empowerment. This conversation that I had just now, it went longer than I anticipated, but it talks about how you can use political power to change the narrative. So that's one example of changing the narrative in Tampa. The second example of changing narrative is the CDC of Tampa. This particular picture here was taken a while back in about 2005, but it's part of the presentation that we made in Baltimore. And when I'm talking about major players, the CDC of Tampa, a Black organization, headed Black organization, at least in a leadership position, actually changed the narrative from a condition where the community was driven by outsiders to a situation where the community actually became an economic force to deal with. So I take my hat off to the CDC of Tampa. This was that Nehemiah project here, in which they focus on really making positive, sustainable change in the neighborhood. And they use a lot of ways in order to get funding. One was the community contribution tax program that they used to help with some of their programs. Now, that particular program that they finessed then provided incentives of 15% tax credit and encouraging corporations to make donations towards community development corporation. This is one of the many types of advantages, even to today. And they're doing some phenomenal things today. Corey Coney is the was the CEO. She created the plan. Her son, who is Ernest Coleman, he continued the dreams on to continue the dream to the day. You got to visit that website. Again, this is an old picture of the CDC, but it shows how they really was grown up when it came to how to really move the now, change the narrative. They also had programs that dealt with youth, and that was anywhere from ages 14 to 18. As a matter of fact, what was so phenomenal about the West Tampa, I'm sorry, what was so phenomenal about the CDC at Tampa is that they was able to create businesses, a different source of income related to, and this is what we call entrepreneur enterprise. They were able to create under this youth program, and this is phenomenal. They was able to create a silk screen T-shirt business that was operated by young people. This is what we talk about, taking it to the next level and creating earned income. The CDC of Tampa, I take my hats off to them all the way back then, and they're doing phenomenal things now. They also created a ice cream shop where youth branded ice cream shop, and they had a couple other businesses as well. Now, they also had their career resource center in which they provided jobs to folks from the bottom up in terms of how to get employment. And they targeted towards low income and people with low skill set, even to the day. What was unique about the CDC of Tampa that I think really was a big dub steps when it comes to creating capital for specifically minority businesses and startup businesses was the program that the CDC in Tampa spearheaded called the microloan programs. Under this program, they created what was known as a peer-to-peer lending program that was designed for the social and economically disadvantaged entrepreneur. Individuals in this peer-to-peer was regular people. As part of a group that want to start their own business, and they decide whether or not, after they got in the training, they should fund that person as part of their group. This was a grant that the CDC was able to connect to. So the loans was from small microloans, anywhere from $500 to $2,500. If you're looking for the mother or mothers of Community Development Corporation, you found it. New Community Corporation. What can I say? They are the big dogs when it comes to really making an impact in the community. Let me give you some highlights. First, they started doing the rides. I think they're in New Jersey. They started doing the rides when everything's being burned down, and they was going to make it. They were supposed to lead an effort to revitalize the community and to bring it back and to bring up not only the community but also provide a mechanism that would uplift the poor. No person left behind. This organization, and this is back about 10 years ago, I know they have increased since they opened that door in 1975. This organization manages nearly 33,000 units of housing that are home to 7,000 people. When I tell you they've done some phenomenal things, they've done some phenomenal things. The Community Investment Department works to maintain and expand access to capital and housing for low income inner city residents that are underserved by traditional financial institutions. The three components of that program includes achieving, let me go back. I got lost. Back on track in terms of the key components. One is the New Community Federal Credit Union that provides user-friendly consumer banking service. The New Community Development Loan Corporation makes capital available. Okay, we're gonna have to hold this here. One organization that I was impressed with is an organization called New Community Corporation. And what they've been able to do has been phenomenal. They well, this is just a little backstory. This is Canton, New Jersey. I think it was during the riots. And basically, those riots destroyed a lot of buildings, and people and businesses that could left, and then left back a blighted area, a poor area, number of poor people. New Community Corporation came out of the dust with the purpose of rebuilding the neighborhood and creating a opportunity for economic development and community development. The corporation is one of the largest nonprofit developers in the country. This group has like over 30 years experience in development and management and managing affordable housing. While today's New Community is a holistic provider of services to the community, the NCC had its beginning in the desperate need for affordable housing and livable housing in the Central Ward. Its first housing development started way back in 1970. This organization right here is the blueprint on how to do big boys and big girls things. This also is part of the thinking that led to the Federal Empowerment Zone, as well as the community building and partnership. One of the things that I had an opportunity to do while I was part of the Sandtown story was to go around the country and look at different nonprofits in order to get a feel relevant to how what they're doing can be used in my community. New Community is one of those organizations I was impressed. So let me continue on. So the today, this organization manages nearly 3,000 units of housing that are home to some 75,000 people. Again, this is a community development corporation that's active like a business. Now, the other thing that I'm impressed with, and again, this was the group in 2005 that we're talking about now. This is the presentation that I made to West Tampa. I'm sorry, this is the presentation I made to Sandtown back then. Just to put it in proper perspective. But let's go move forward with what this was done during this period right here. They created the Community Investment Development. I'm sorry, they created the Community Investment Department. I'm sorry, the Community Investment Economic Department works to maintain and expand access to capital and housing for low-income inner city residents that are underserved by the traditional financial institutions. The three components of the department each play a role in achieving this goal. The new Community Federal Credit Union provides user-friendly consumer banking services. The new Community Development Loan Corporation makes capital available for growing businesses and startup ventures. The Garden State Affordable Housing provides equity investment for construction of affordable homes through the use of the New Jersey Housing Opportunity Fund, which is a statewide pool of funds. If you're still with me, you see what I mean by how do you begin to make changes in your neighborhood. So this gives a little bit more about the New Community Corporation. I'm going to move from here and jump to the next presentation. Marshall Heights Community Development Corporation is in DC. And during the time that we did the presentation to the Sandtown community, we highlighted this as one of we thought was the groups that are changing the narrative. They provided facade programs to businesses. They also act as advocates for business development in the Ward 7. Working with business owners, private investors, public agencies to expand economic opportunities for the people who live and work and do business in the area. So as you can see, some of the programs that they oversee includes entrepreneurship and training workshops, one-on-one counseling, technical assistance, loan application, assisting with workforce needs, etc. The other entity that I thought was worth looking at, and again, I'm impressed with all of these different approaches that we did give to Sandtown, and these approaches right here can still be used today. What's important, and I hope it resonates in Sandtown, is that there is an approach that can change the narrative. And I'm so looking forward to having different conversations with different people in Sandtown to talk about at different moves and shakers as to how can this plan be used in the Sandtown area. But I think it's worth noteworthy that you can't do nothing without connecting to the individual community people at the community level first. You have to build a relationship on the ground level before you even begin to talk about taking it to the next level. What's important about this particular program, Suburban Job Ranch, and what I'm impressed with, is they were able to do two things in order to bring in revenue to that organization. And they focus on workforce development and transportation, because transportation is big money. What they did was to create an opportunity for people that were unemployed to be given the skills necessary to get a job, and then to be job placed. And a job placement came with stipulation. That is, if they place in a job, they had to give a certain amount of money back to the nonprofit for finding a job. This is what we call creating, recycling the money back. So the next person comes along and able to get a job. And it's a minimum amount. We also look at this amount, this strategy right here in West Tampa. The second part of the strategy was to connect with employers on two fronts. First, to tell employers that you had a ready workforce that you can connect to meet their employment needs, and that the people that were being transferred by you were well vetted. The problem was with, especially when you're looking at these new low-level service positions, people wasn't staying on the job. So what they were able to do was to say, we vetted these people and they will stay on the job. In return for us connecting that person to your job, then we're charging you a fee. That's not, that, and it doesn't end there. Then they say, we're also going to charge a fee to both the client and the business for transportation. That is, we will provide transportation so that the client can get to the job, but we're charging the client and we're charging the employer a minimum fee. As you see, what they was able to do was to create a source of income in order to finesse their deal. The key to any successful community-driven project is the ability to bring in finance. So let's look at what we put together in terms of how do we bring in monies in order to fund the deal. So what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about social entrepreneurship. It's the ability to raise, it's the ability to find the future. Let me start back again. It's the ability to fund the future of a nonprofit through a combination of earned income, charitable contributions, and public sector subsidies. The earned income is used to pursue social objectives by simultaneously seeking both financial and social return on investment. I think the key to this model is that if we depend upon only grants as a way to fund your program, project, initiative, you're dead on the right. Let's talk about this model, that four components that I want to bring to light. The first is input. Input is all the ways we're going to bring in money. The second is output. What do we plan to use the money on? I can't emphasize the importance of this model when we go for funding. Funders are pressed with our laid out plan. From output, then we talk about outcomes. And from outcomes, we talk about benefits. So we talk about input, output, outcomes, and benefit as a mechanism to show why it makes sense to our funders. Input, that is, we're going to start with what are the resources or the revenue that we bring in or that we bring into play or input. That includes the traditional way of grants, fee for service, development fees if you are doing like development, like affordable housing, etc. Consultant fees if you are consultant of a smaller groups that's looking to be more mature like yourself. And you can even own and operate different types of nonprofit businesses. This is really about the part when we talk about earned income, a mechanism of bringing in money that doesn't depend totally on grants, but you got different revenue sources. The other way you can bring in money in terms of the organization is looking at partnership with the private sector, doing public-private relationships. An example is the deals that we talked about earlier, and which we was able to bring in monies from working directly with developers. That's another way that you can bring in money. And I have a list of other ways that you can bring it in as well. Now, what do you do with this money? Output. Well, for us, because we're doing community comprehensive planning, that money then is going to employment programs, public safety, youth programs, community building, affordable housing, community mapping. Again, we want to do mapping assets, neighborhood revitalization. Outcome. What's the outcome? Well, we're going to increase employment opportunities in the community, increase affordable housing in the community, reduce crime in the community, and generally improve the quality of life of residents. What are the benefits? That means is what's the return on investment for what we're doing? First, because we're working to improve the quality of life in the community and working with increasing businesses, that's an automatic increase to the tax base. Next, because we're improving the quality of life, that's going to be a reduction in the required city services. There's a lot of city services that go into a community that's not taking care of itself. Then it's going to be a reduction in crime that's tied into employment opportunity, startup businesses, and creating community building. Then for lenders, this means there's going to be a reduction in risk because of the fact that we're transforming it, making it a healthy, prosperous community where money grows. So that then begins to get play in from their investment. It's a good return on their investment. And it's a good return in terms of the government getting the benefits from this type of return. It's when we talk about investments and how it increases the return on investment because of the fact that the business is surviving now. We're taking away those things that would be detrimental for that business to be successful. We talked about reduction to lenders. As you know, banks, they really, really very worry when it comes to putting money into a low-income community. They're concerned whether or not they get that money back. Because of the approach that we taken to revitalize the community, that reduces that fear in terms of making loans and to especially poor businesses that are in the community. So there you have it. We talked about a lot of things tonight. And at the end of the day, what I wanted to do was to make a presentation that can shed light on the fact that there are doable approaches for people that live in the poorest of the communities to come together and put together resources. If you like this presentation, give a like to my social media format or contact us to get more information about what you can do in your community to put together similar programs that we talked about earlier. You can reach out to me at the Center for Nonprofit at Community. I'm sorry, the Center for Nonprofit at Community. I forgot my email. Center for Nonprofit at Community at gmail.com. Center for Nonprofit and Community at gmail.com. There is an opportunity to move from a resident of a poor community, of being hopeless, of being not taken seriously, to now being able to mobilize, organize, and change the narrative in your community. I hope this has been helpful. I know it's been long-winded, but it was a long time in coming. Thank you.